Have you ever heard the words, "You're fired," and felt your stomach drop like an elevator with the cables cut? What if those words weren't the end at all, but the beginning of your leverage? Today you'll hear how one sentence turned a firing into a raise, and by the end of this story you'll know how to use it. Before we start, tell me in the comments, what's the toughest conversation you're facing at work right now? Let me tell you a story. This is about Sarah. Real person, real situation. It was a gray Tuesday at 8:13 a.m. Fluorescent lights hissed overhead. The office smelled like burnt coffee and rain-soaked wool. A thin envelope waited on the table, face down, like a quiet verdict. Her manager cleared his throat. HR will join us shortly. She knew. The sentence came clinical, almost gentle. You're fired. Most people, about 83% by the way, walk into moments like this without a frame, without a plan, and without an alternative. Sarah did too at first. But by the end of this story, you'll know the one sentence that changed everything for her. Here's where everything went wrong. Performance has slipped. We're restructuring, her manager said, eyes not quite meeting hers. HR slid a paper across the table with the choreography of someone who had done this too many times. Sarah heard herself ask, small and shaky, "Is there any flexibility?" HR answered, "The decision's made. We can discuss transition support." The more she spoke from fear, the more final it sounded. 3 mistakes happened fast. First, she argued from emotion, not evidence. She wanted them to feel her value, but feelings alone rarely travel up a chain of command. Second, she had no BATNA, no best alternative to a negotiated agreement, so every word carried the scent of desperation. Third, she accepted the frame. You're fired as the end of the story, instead of the start of a risk conversation. She left the room with a folder, a hollow feeling in her ribs and a mind that wouldn't stop replaying the scene. That night, something shifted. She sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad and asked a better question. If I were my manager, what risk would keep me up tonight? She wrote what she knew. A product launch in Q1, an aggressive cost reduction promise, a backlog of vendor contracts only she could untangle quickly. She closed her eyes and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Breathe, she told herself. Slow the movie down. She started preparing like a professional negotiator. She printed 2 pages, timelines, bug burn down, and a clean list of vendor savings that traced directly to her templates. She called a partner vendor she'd once helped and asked for a short paid consulting option she could start next week. Not a bluff, a real alternative. The offer arrived in her inbox, 60 days scope to vendor optimization. She noticed how her shoulders dropped. A credible BATNA calms your voice before you ever speak. Then she rehearsed language that lowers defenses. She stood in front of the mirror and labeled what her manager was likely feeling. It sounds like you're being squeezed to hit Q1 dates while cutting cost. She mirrored the last 3 words softly. Cutting cost? She practiced calibrated questions that steered decisions without force. How can we hit Q1 outcomes with lower total risk if we restart from 0? She underlined a single line on the page and said it out loud until it felt like hers. Convert my exit into a 90-day plan with 2 deliverables and a clean kill switch. If I hit the targets, we roll forward at the agreed band. She whispered the embedded directives that keep attention focused on solutions. Notice how this reduces your risk this quarter. Consider the cost of losing momentum. Imagine the launch without vendor delays. She didn't plan to speak them like commands, just a calm rhythm that invites the mind to look where you point. She organized everything into 4 clear beats. First, frame the stakes in their language. Second, illuminate value with evidence tied to commitments they already care about. Third, re-anchor with a credible alternative to steady the conversation. Fourth, offer an exchange that makes saying yes the safer option. Frame, proof, alternative, exchange. She wrote the words big and circled them. Watch for these 4 beats, she told herself. If I hit them in order, the conversation changes. The next morning, she sent a short email. I'd value 10 minutes to discuss a lower risk path for Q1 outcomes. No drama, just a promise to reduce risk. Her manager replied with a time. As the clock approached the meeting, she pictured the room again. The hiss of the lights, the thin envelope, the practiced tone. She set a quiet intention. Be the calmest person in the room. She imagined her voice steady and low. She imagined letting silence breathe. She imagined her manager relaxing his shoulders when he realized she was not there to fight, but to solve a problem he actually had. Let's talk, he said as she sat down. She nodded once. It sounds like you're under pressure to hit the Q1 launch while cutting spend, she began. That's a brutal combination. He exhaled, a small tell that tension dropped an inch. Exactly. 3 months ago, she continued, we committed to a 12% reduction in vendor costs by standardizing contracts. My templates delivered 14%. Finance documented the variance. Right now, restarting from zero puts the launch 3 weeks at risk. There's a safer option. HR folded her hands. We're listening. Convert my exit into a 90-day plan tied to 2 deliverables. First, I deliver the launch checklist by February 28th. Second, I lock an additional 10% vendor savings. In return, I'll train Alex and document every process by March 15th. If I miss, you end it with no severance. If I hit, we roll into a full-time role at Band L6. It's a clean decision either way. Silence. She let it breathe. She didn't fill it. She watched a second hand sweep from the 12 to the 2. Her manager glanced at HR, then back at Sarah. If you can de-risk the launch and get those savings, it's a win. HR nodded. We can structure a plan aligned to those deliverables. That was the turn. But here's the truth. Conversations rarely move in one push. Objections show up in waves, and your job is to surf them without splashing. Later that day, the first wave arrived. We can't set precedents, the manager said on a follow-up call. Sarah labeled it. Sounds like you're guarding fairness and consistency. He said, exactly. She bridged to consistency with commitments already made. 3 months ago, we promised the board a 12% reduction. We exceeded it with 14. Continuing that path is consistent. The plan isn't a precedent. It's a way to keep our word. Budget's frozen, he said 2 minutes later. She didn't argue. She asked a calibrated question. How can we hit Q1 outcomes with lower total risk if we restart from zero given the freeze? He paused. We'd have to pull someone off onboarding. That delays both timelines. She let him hear the cost in his own words, then offered the exchange again. Value for safety. We already communicated the decision, HR said in another moment. Sarah reframed to risk. What would make reversing course the safer option for the launch owner? Silence then. If the plan is measurable, time-boxed, and reversible. That's exactly what I'm proposing, Sarah said. 2 deliverables, 90 days, kill switch. While all this happened, she kept her BATNA warm. The vendor contract sat in her inbox like a quiet parachute. Just knowing she could pull it changed her posture. She spoke slower. She didn't chase. She let the other side consider. Let's zoom out for a moment. If you've ever been hit with a sudden no, a canceled project, a demotion, a firing, you may have felt the urge to plead. That urge is human, and it's also the fastest way to push people away. People move when you reduce their risk and make their next step defendable. So try on Sarah's 4 beats right now in your own words. Frame their stakes. Prove your value with evidence tied to commitments they care about. Present a real alternative so you're not clinging to them. Offer an exchange that solves their immediate pain. Too many stories to make this concrete. In sales, an account executive named Luis was told he'd be let go for missing quota. He framed the stakes in his VP's language. You need committed revenue you can defend in the forecast. He showed proof. 2 late-stage deals with signed mutual action plans. He presented an alternative, a competitor courting him for a short contract. Then he offered the exchange. 45 days to close 2 accounts in return for a process playbook and clean handoff. Kill switch if he missed. He closed one in 21 days, saved the seat, and left the team with a repeatable plan. In product, a PM named Dana faced a similar decision. She reframed a termination into a 60-day stabilization sprint tied to churn and handoff metrics, offered to instrument dashboards and train her replacement, and anchored with a consulting option waiting in fintech. The company took the safer path. 2 months later, churn dropped and Dana stayed. Back to Sarah. 2 days after the first meeting, she walked into the office again. She paused at the door just long enough to feel the ground under her feet. Be the calmest person in the room, she reminded herself. It sounds like Q1 has to ship on time while reducing OPEX, she said once they sat. That's tight. Exactly, her manager said. 3 months ago, we committed to a 12% vendor reduction. My templates delivered 14. Finance documented it. Restarting now adds 3 weeks of risk. There's a safer option. We're listening, HR said. Convert my exit into a 90-day plan. I deliver the launch checklist by February 28th, and I lock 10% vendor savings. I train Alex and document everything by March 15th. If I miss, you end it. No severance. If I hit, we roll into full-time at band L6. Another silence. She let it be, then added softly, notice how this gives you a measurable path you can defend upstairs. Her manager tapped the table once, a tiny drumbeat. If you can do it, it's a win. I'll send the plan in writing by end of day, she said. She sent it. 2 pages, crisp numbers, clear dates, explicit kill switch. And then she did the work. She shipped the checklist ahead of schedule. Vendor savings landed at 12.6%. The plan flipped to a full-time offer and comp bumped 8% to match the band. But money wasn't the biggest change. Her identity shifted. From fired to fixer. From problem to risk reducer. Here are the parts you can use this week. People move when you speak their language and reduce their risk. So build a value dossier, 3 wins with numbers, each tied to a commitment the company already made, each validated by a third party, finance, analytics, or a client email. Build a real BATNA. 1 outside project or internal rotation you could accept within 30 days. Not to threaten, just to stabilize your voice and your options. Practice your 4 beats out loud until they feel like muscle memory. Frame, proof, alternative, exchange. If you have a tough meeting this week, do this tonight. Write the sentence that offers a conditional yes. Convert my exit into a time-boxed plan with 2 deliverables and a clean kill switch. If I miss, you end it. If I hit, we roll forward. Say it until your voice is calm. Imagine the other person hearing not need but safety. Let them feel how easy it is to defend your proposal. Then sleep. Let your nervous system come back to baseline. If you don't have a meeting yet, create your leverage now. Draft that value dossier. Reach out to a past client or a friendly vendor and explore a discrete paid option you could start within a month. You'll be surprised how quickly your spine straightens when your alternatives are real. Remember that stat from earlier? Most people, 83%, walk into these moments with no frame and no alternative. Sarah did too. But once she framed the stakes in their language, proved value with evidence, re-anchored with a credible alternative, and offered an exchange that made yes safer than no, the conversation changed. The same can happen for you. Next time you face that conversation, you'll be ready. And when someone says you're fired, you'll hear what Sarah learned to hear. This is a decision that still needs a safer option. Share your biggest workplace challenge in the comments and subscribe for new workplace persuasion tactics every week.